In the glittering world of royal protocol, where every gesture carries meaning and every accessory tells a story, one piece of jewelry would ignite a controversy that would shake the very foundations of palace tradition. What began as an elegant evening gala would transform into a moment of unprecedented drama when Queen Consort Camilla made a choice that left King Charles speechless and the royal household in chaos. The sapphire and diamond necklace that graced her neck that evening wasn't just any piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of love, loss, and legacy that belonged to another. As cameras flashed and guests mingled in the opulent ballroom, nobody could have predicted that this single accessory would unleash secrets buried deep within palace walls, force confrontations that had been avoided for years, and ultimately reveal the true dynamics of power within a modern British monarchy. This is the story of how one woman's bold decision to wear another's treasured necklace would change the royal family forever. The autumn evening descended upon Windsor Castle like a velvet curtain, setting the stage for what was supposed to be one of the most elegant charity galas of the year. The Duchess of Cornwall's Foundation for Arts and Literature had organized this spectacular event to raise funds for underprivileged children's education programs across the Commonwealth. As guests arrived in their finest evening wear, the great hall sparkled with crystal chandeliers casting dancing shadows across the ancient stone walls that had witnessed centuries of royal history. Queen Consort Camilla stood before her ornate dressing room mirror, her personal stylist Sandra making final adjustments to her deep emerald silk gown. The dress, designed exclusively by Bruce Oldfield, flowed elegantly to the floor with intricate beadwork that caught the light with every movement. Her hair was styled in an elegant chignon, and her makeup was flawless, but something seemed incomplete about her ensemble. Sandra stepped back to admire her work, then frowned slightly. The neckline of the dress demanded something special, something that would complement the grandeur of the occasion and Camilla's position as queen consort. The emerald parure that had been initially selected seemed too heavy, too overwhelming for the delicate beadwork of the gown. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should reconsider the jewelry selection," Sandra suggested diplomatically. The emeralds, while beautiful, might compete with the dress rather than enhance it. Camilla nodded remorsefully. "Her fingers absently touching her barnick." She had always been particular about accessories, understanding their importance in royal appearances. Every piece she wore would be photographed, analyzed, and discussed by fashion experts and royal watchers around the world. The pressure to look perfect was constant, but she had grown accustomed to it over the years. "What do you suggest?" Camilla asked, turning slightly to catch the light from different angles. Sandra moved to the jewelry case that had been specially brought from the royal vault for the evening. Her experienced, I scanned the available options, each piece more stunning than the last. There were tiaras that had adorned queens for generations, brooches with fascinating histories, and necklaces that told stories of romance and triumph. As she reached for a relatively simple pearl strand, her hand brushed against a silk-lined compartment that wasn't typically opened for Camilla's events. Inside lay a breathtaking piece that made her gasp audibly. The necklace was extraordinary, featuring a cascade of sapphires and diamonds arranged in an intricate floral pattern. The center stone, a magnificent Ceylon sapphire surrounded by brilliant cut diamonds, seemed to pulse with an inner fire under the soft lighting. "What about this one?" Sandra asked, lifting the necklace carefully from its resting place. Camilla's eyes widened as she saw the piece. It was absolutely stunning, the kind of jewelry that transformed an outfit from beautiful to unforgettable. The sapphires were a perfect complement to her emerald dress, creating a rich jewel-toned palette that would photograph magnificently. "It's beautiful," she whispered, reaching out to touch the central sapphire. "I've never seen this piece before. Where did it come from?" Sandra consulted the small card that accompanied each piece in the royal collection. Her face went pale as she read the inscription. "Your Majesty, this is listed as part of the Princess of Wales collection. It belongs to Catherine." For a moment, silence filled the room. Camilla stared at the necklace, her mind racing. She knew that the royal jewelry collection was vast and complex, with pieces assigned to different members of the family based on rank, tradition, and personal preference. As queen consort, she had access to many incredible pieces, but there were still items that were specifically designated for other family members. "Are you certain?" Camilla asked, though she could see the uncertainty in Sandra's expression. The card indicates it was a wedding gift to the Princess of Wales, but Sandra hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Perhaps there's been a mistake in the cataloging? These pieces sometimes get mixed up during transfers between residences." Camilla continued to stare at the necklace. In her years of marriage to Charles, she had learned to navigate the complex web of royal protocol, but there were still moments when the rules seemed unclear or contradictory. The jewelry collection, in particular, was a source of ongoing confusion, with pieces moving between various royals based on events, rankings, and sometimes simply availability. "How long do we have before the reception?" she asked. "About 30 minutes, Your Majesty." The clock was ticking, and Camilla knew that her appearance was crucial for the evening's success. The gala was being broadcast live on several networks, and photographs would appear in newspapers around the world the next morning. She needed to look absolutely perfect, and this necklace would undoubtedly achieve that goal. "I'm sure we'll be fine," she decided, turning back toward the mirror. "If there's truly an issue, it could be sorted out after the event. For now, let's focus on making this evening a success." Sandra nodded, though her expression remained troubled. She had been working with the royal family long enough to understand the delicate politics that surrounded everything they did, especially when it came to jewelry and fashion choices. However, her job was to make the queen consort look magnificent, and this necklace would certainly accomplish that. As Sandra fastened the clasp behind Camilla's neck, the transformation was immediate and striking. The sapphires seemed to come alive against her skin, and the diamonds caught the light with every breath she took. The necklace was clearly a masterpiece of jewelry craftsmanship, with each stone perfectly set to maximize its brilliance and fire. "It's perfect," Camilla said, admiring her reflection. The necklace elevated her entire ensemble, making her look regal and sophisticated in a way that few pieces could achieve. She felt confident and beautiful, ready to charm the hundreds of guests who would be attending the gala. Meanwhile, in another wing of the castle, King Charles was making his own final preparations for the evening. His valet, Michael, was adjusting his white bow tie when Charles caught sight of his reflection in the antique mirror. At 75, he cut an impressive figure in his perfectly tailored evening wear, every detail meticulously attended to. "The guest list is quite impressive this evening," Michael commented as he brushed imaginary lint from Charles's dinner jacket. "The Prime Minister will be attending, along with several cabinet ministers and numerous international dignitaries." Charles nodded, his mind already shifting into the focused state he required for such events. After decades of public appearances, he had developed an almost automatic ability to remember names, engage in meaningful conversation, and represent the crown with dignity and grace. Tonight would be no different, except for the added satisfaction of supporting one of Camilla's favorite causes. "Has the queen consort finished her preparations?" he asked. "I believe so, Your Majesty. She should be making her way to the reception hall shortly." Charles adjusted his cufflinks, each bearing the royal cipher that marked him as the sovereign. These formal events were both a privilege and a responsibility, opportunities to support worthy causes while maintaining the traditions and dignity of the monarchy. He took particular pride in Camilla's charitable work, watching her grow into her role as queen consort with grace and determination. As he made his way through the castle's corridors toward the Great Hall, Charles reflected on how far they had come together. The early years of their marriage had been challenging, with constant media scrutiny and public skepticism about Camilla's role in the royal family. But time had proven her dedication to duty and her genuine commitment to making a positive difference in the world. The Great Hall was already filled with guests when Charles arrived, the sound of conversation and gentle laughter mixing with the soft notes of a string quartet positioned near the massive fireplace. Servers moved elegantly through the crowd with champagne and canapes, while photographers captured candid moments of the distinguished guests. Charles began his customary mingling, greeting familiar faces and being introduced to new ones. The Prime Minister approached for a brief conversation about upcoming state visits, while the Archbishop of Canterbury shared thoughts on a recent interfaith initiative. These were the moments Charles truly enjoyed, when formal protocol gave way to genuine conversation about issues that mattered. As the reception continued, Charles found himself glancing toward the entrance, waiting for Camilla's arrival. Protocol dictated that she would make a grand entrance after most guests had arrived, allowing for the photographers to capture her in all her splendor. This was always one of his favorite moments at any event, watching his wife command attention and admiration as she moved through the room. The string quartet's music softened, and conversations gradually quieted as word spread that the Queen Consort was about to arrive. Charles positioned himself near the center of the room, ready to welcome his wife and begin the formal portion of the evening's program. The great doors at the far end of the hall opened, and Camilla appeared, radiant in her emerald gown. She paused for a moment in the doorway, allowing the photographers to capture her entrance, her smile warm and genuine as she surveyed the distinguished gathering. It was then that Charles saw the necklace, that Charles's breath caught in his throat as his eyes fixed on the magnificent sapphire and diamond necklace adorning Camilla's neck. The piece was unmistakable, etched into his memory from countless significant moments over the past decade. He had watched as it graced Catherine's neck at state dinners, royal weddings, and formal portraits that would hang in palace halls for generations to come. The necklace had been his personal gift to Catherine on her wedding day to William, a gesture symbolizing her acceptance into the heart of the royal family. The irony was not lost on him that this particular piece held such personal significance. Charles had chosen it specifically for Catherine after spending months working with royal jewelers to create something unique, something that would represent both the tradition of the monarchy and the fresh perspective she brought to the family. The central salon sapphire had been selected for its remarkable clarity and deep blue color, reminiscent of Diana's engagement ring, but distinct enough to be Catherine's own. As Camilla moved gracefully through the receiving line, greeting guests with her characteristic warmth and charm, Charles felt his composure beginning to crack. The necklace caught the light from the crystal chandeliers with each step she took, creating a dazzling display that drew admiring glances from everyone in the room. Several guests complimented her on the stunning piece, their appreciation genuine and enthusiastic. "Your Majesty, what an absolutely breathtaking necklace," commented the French ambassador's wife, her eyes sparkling with genuine admiration. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary." "Thank you so much," Camilla replied graciously, her hand unconsciously moving to touch the central sapphire. "It is rather special, isn't it?" Charles watched this exchange from across the room, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. The casual way Camilla accepted compliments for wearing Catherine's necklace struck him as deeply problematic. This wasn't simply a matter of borrowing jewelry from the royal collection. This was a piece with profound personal meaning, and its appearance at this public event would undoubtedly be noticed and analyzed by royal watchers around the world. Lady Margaret Thornfield, one of Camilla's oldest friends and a frequent companion at royal events, approached the Queen Consort with obvious delight. "Camilla, darling, you look absolutely magnificent tonight. That necklace is stunning. Is it new?" "Not exactly new," Camilla responded with a slight smile, "but it's new to me. I discovered it just this evening while selecting jewelry for tonight." The explanation troubled Charles even more. The casual way Camilla described discovering the necklace suggested either a concerning lack of awareness about the Royal Jewelry Collections organization or a deliberate decision to wear something she knew belonged to another family member. Either possibility was deeply unsettling. As the evening progressed, Charles found it increasingly difficult to concentrate on his conversations with guests. His eyes kept returning to the necklace, watching how it moved with Camilla as she laughed and chatted with various dignitaries. The piece was undeniably beautiful on her, complementing her gown and complexion perfectly, but its presence felt like a violation of something sacred. During dinner, Charles was seated at the head table between the Prime Minister and the patron saint of the evening charity, but his attention kept drifting to Camilla, who was holding court at the adjacent table with several prominent philanthropists and business leaders. The necklace continued to draw compliments throughout the meal, with each comment feeling like another small betrayal to Charles. "The Queen Consort looks particularly radiant this evening," observed the Prime Minister, following Charles's gaze. "That necklace is quite remarkable. I don't recall seeing it before." "No," Charles replied carefully. "I don't believe it's made many public appearances." This was technically true, as Catherine had worn the necklace primarily to private family events and a few select state functions. Charles had been looking forward to seeing it become a signature piece for Catherine, something that would be associated with her throughout her years as Princess of Wales and eventually as Queen. Seeing it on Camilla felt like watching a treasured family heirloom being casually appropriated. The formal program began after dinner, with Charles delivering remarks about the importance of arts education and Camilla speaking passionately about the Foundation's work with underprivileged children. Despite his growing discomfort about the jewelry situation, Charles couldn't help but admire his wife's eloquence and genuine commitment to the cause. She spoke without notes, her words flowing naturally as she described meeting children whose lives have been transformed through access to literature and creative programs. "Education is the greatest gift we can give any child," Camilla said, her voice carrying clearly through the great hall. "When we open the door to learning, we open the door to unlimited possibilities." The audience responded with enthusiastic applause, clearly moved by her sincerity and passion. Several major donors approached the stage afterward to make additional contributions, inspired by her words and the obvious success of the Foundation's programs. As the formal program concluded and guests began to mingle again, Charles made his way toward Camilla. He needed to address the necklace situation, but he also recognized the delicate nature of confronting his wife in public. Any sign of tension between them would be immediately noticed and potentially misinterpreted by the press and public. "Darling, wonderful speech," he said as he approached, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "Very moving indeed." "Thank you," Camilla replied, her face glowing with satisfaction at the evening's success. "I think we may have exceeded our fundraising goals for the year with tonight's donations alone." "That's marvelous," Charles agreed, though his smile felt forced. "Camilla, I wonder if we might have a brief word in private when convenient." Something in his tone must have alerted her to his mood, because her expression shifted slightly. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," he assured her, though they both knew this was not entirely true. "Just a small matter we should discuss." They were interrupted by the approach of several photographers who had been granted access to capture candid moments from the gala. The couple automatically shifted into their public personas, smiling warmly as the cameras flashed around them. Camilla instinctively adjusted her posture to better display the necklace, a movement that felt like salt in Charles's emotional wound. "Your Majesties, could we get a few shots of you together near the portrait gallery?" requested the lead photographer, a seasoned professional who had covered royal events for decades. Charles and Camilla moved as requested, their public training taking over despite the private tension building between them. They posed naturally, their years of experience making them seem relaxed and happy for the cameras. The necklace caught the photographer's lights brilliantly, creating stunning images that would undoubtedly be featured prominently in the next day's coverage. "Beautiful piece of jewelry, Your Majesty," commented the photographer as he adjusted his settings. "The sapphires are extraordinary." "Thank you," Camilla replied graciously, her hand again moving to touch the central stone. It seemed perfect for this evening. Charles managed to maintain his composure throughout the photo session, but internally he was becoming increasingly frustrated. Each compliment about the necklace, each time Camilla accepted praise for wearing it, felt like another small betrayal of Catherine and the trust he had placed in the family's respect for each other's personal belongings. As the photography session concluded, Charles and Camilla returned to their hosting duties, but the ease and natural chemistry they typically displayed seemed somewhat strained. Observant guests might have noticed that their conversations were slightly more formal than usual, their smiles requiring a bit more effort. The evening continued with dancing and informal conversation, but Charles found himself watching the clock, eager for the event to conclude so he could address the situation properly. The necklace seemed to grow more prominent as the night progressed, drawing attention from every angle and generating discussions among guests about royal fashion and jewelry collections. Near midnight, as the last guests were saying their goodbyes and expressing gratitude for a wonderful evening, Charles and Camilla finally found themselves alone in the Great Hall. The servers had cleared most of the tables, and the string quartet had packed away their instruments, leaving the vast space feeling suddenly intimate and quiet. The evening was a tremendous success, Camilla said, removing her evening gloves and flexing her fingers. I think the foundation will benefit enormously from tonight's generosity. Indeed, Charles replied, his tone more subdued than the occasion seemed to warrant. Camilla, about that necklace you're wearing. She looked down at the sapphire and diamond creation, her expression becoming guarded. What about it? Do you know where it came from? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that neither was quite ready to address directly. Camilla's hand moved unconsciously to her throat, her fingers touching the central sapphire as if seeking comfort from the beautiful stone. I found it in the jewelry selection that was brought for tonight, she said carefully. Sandra, and I thought it would complement my gown perfectly. Camilla, Charles said gently but firmly, that necklace belongs to Catherine. It was my wedding gift to her. The revelation hit Camilla like a physical blow, her face paling visibly despite her carefully applied makeup. She stared at Charles for a long moment, processing not just the information, but its implications for their marriage, their public image, and the delicate balance of relationships within the royal family. The silence that followed Charles's revelation seemed to stretch endlessly in the vast emptiness of the Great Hall. Camilla's fingers remained frozen at her throat, clutching the sapphire pendant as if it might somehow transform into something less complicated, something that belonged to her without question. The weight of the necklace suddenly felt crushing, each diamond and sapphire bearing witness to her mistake. Charles, I had no idea, she whispered, her voice barely audible in the cavernous space. The jewelry case was brought to my room as usual, and Sandra and I simply selected what looked best with the gown. There was no indication that this piece was specifically Catherine's. Charles studied his wife's face, searching for any sign of deception, but finding only genuine shock and growing mortification. He wanted to believe her explanation, needed to believe it for the sake of their marriage and their public image, but questions remained about how such a significant oversight could occur. The cataloging system is supposed to prevent exactly this type of confusion, he said, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration that few people ever witnessed. There should have been clear markings indicating that this piece was specifically designated for the Princess of Wales. Camilla's mind raced back to the evening's preparations, remembering Sandra's hesitation when she first discovered the necklace, the brief consultation of the card, the moment of uncertainty that they had both chosen to dismiss in the rush to prepare for the gala. The memory filled her with a sick sense of dread as she realized they had both known something wasn't quite right, but had proceeded anyway. Sandra did check the documentation, she admitted reluctantly, her voice growing smaller with each word. There was some confusion about the cataloging, but we thought perhaps there had been an administrative error. We were running short on time, and this piece was so perfect for the occasion. The admission hung between them like a confession, and Charles felt his disappointment deepening. This wasn't simply a case of innocent mistake. There had been warning signs that were consciously ignored. The decision to proceed despite uncertainty showed a troubling disregard for the careful protocols that governed royal behavior and family relationships. Camilla, he said, his voice taking on the formal tone he typically reserved for state business. You must understand how this appears. You wore Catherine's personal wedding gift to a public event where it was photographed extensively and admired by hundreds of people. Those photographs will be published around the world. The full implications of the situation began to dawn on Camilla with horrifying clarity. By morning, images of her wearing Catherine's necklace would appear in newspapers across the Commonwealth and beyond. Royal fashion experts would analyze every detail of her appearance, and the necklace would undoubtedly receive particular attention due to its stunning beauty and apparent rarity. "Oh God," she breathed, sinking into one of the gilded chairs that lined the walls of the Great Hall. "Catherine will see the photographs. We will see them. The entire family will know." Charles watched his wife's distress with conflicted emotions. Part of him felt sympathy for her obvious anguish, but another part remained focused on the damage that had been done and the challenges they now faced in addressing it. The royal family's internal dynamics were complex enough without adding the complications of perceived jewelry theft and public humiliation. "We need to develop a plan for handling the situation before the photographs are published," he said, shifting into the practical mode that had served him well throughout decades of crisis management. "The Palace Press Office should be notified immediately so they can prepare appropriate responses to any inquiries." Camilla looked up at him with a mixture of gratitude and desperation. "What kind of responses? How do we possibly explain this without making everything worse?" It was a valid question, and Charles didn't have a ready answer. The truth would be embarrassing and potentially damaging to relationships within the family, but any attempt to cover up or misrepresent the situation could prove even more problematic if discovered. The royal family had learned through bitter experience that honesty, however painful, was generally preferable to deception in dealing with public controversies. "Perhaps we could frame it as a simple administrative error," Charles suggested, though he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. "The jewelry collection is vast and complex, and occasionally pieces do get miscategorized or mislabeled. But that throws Sandra under the bus," Camilla protested, her sense of loyalty to her staff overriding her desire for self-preservation. She was following established protocols and relying on the documentation provided to her. This isn't her fault. Charles appreciated his wife's protective instincts toward her staff, but the reality of their situation demanded difficult choices. Someone would need to bear responsibility for the oversight, and it would be far better for that person to be a staff member rather than the Queen Consort herself. "Sandra's career won't be destroyed by taking responsibility for a cataloging error," he pointed out pragmatically. "But your reputation, and by extension the reputation of the monarchy, could be seriously damaged if this is perceived as deliberate appropriation of another family member's jewelry." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps echoing through the hall. Both Charles and Camilla turned to see Sandra approaching hesitantly, clearly aware that something significant was being discussed. Her earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by the uncertain demeanor of someone who sensed that her professional judgment was being questioned. "Your Majesties, I hope I'm not interrupting," she said carefully, "but I wanted to confirm the arrangements for tomorrow's schedule and discuss the return of tonight's jewelry to the vault." The mention of returning the jewelry created another moment of uncomfortable silence. Charles and Camilla exchanged glances, both realizing that Sandra's presence offered an opportunity to get her perspective on what had happened and potentially develop a unified approach to managing the situation. "Sandra," Camilla said gently, "we need to discuss the necklace I wore this evening. It appears there may have been some confusion about its availability for tonight's event." Sandra's face went ashen as she realized the implications of what was being suggested. "Your Majesty, I followed all standard procedures for jewelry selection. The piece was included in the collection brought from the vault, and the documentation I reviewed indicated it was available for use." "What exactly did the documentation say?" Charles asked, his tone more official than accusatory, but still clearly seeking specific answers. Sandra fidgeted with the small notebook she always carried, consulting notes she had made earlier in the evening. The card accompanying the necklace indicated it was part of the Princess of Wales collection, but there was no explicit restriction noted. In past situations, pieces have been shared between family members for special occasions, particularly when they complement specific outfits perfectly. This explanation provided some context for the confusion, but it also highlighted the problematic gray areas that existed within the royal jewelry management system. Charles made a mental note to review and clarify these protocols to prevent future misunderstandings. Sandra, Camilla said with obvious difficulty, this particular necklace was King Charles's personal wedding gift to the Princess of Wales. It holds special significance beyond its monetary or artistic value. The revelation clearly devastated Sandra, who had built her career on attention to detail and flawless execution of royal fashion requirements. Her hands trembled slightly as she processed the magnitude of the error and its potential consequences for everyone involved. "Your Majesties, I am deeply sorry," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "If I had understood the personal significance of the piece, I would never have suggested its use. I take full responsibility for this oversight." Charles studied Sandra's reaction, finding it consistent with genuine remorse rather than calculated deflection. Her obvious distress suggested that the error was indeed unintentional, the result of systemic problems rather than individual negligence. "The question now is how we address the situation moving forward," he said, shifting focus from blame to solutions. "Those photographs will be published regardless of our preferences, and we need to be prepared for questions about the necklace." Camilla stood up from her chair, beginning to pace as she often did when working through complex problems. The necklace caught the light with each step, a constant reminder of the predicament they faced. "Could we contact Catherine directly?" she suggested. "Explain what happened and ask for her guidance on how she would prefer us to handle any public inquiries." The suggestion had merit, but Charles knew it also carried risks. Catherine's reaction to learning that her personal wedding gift had been worn publicly by another family member was unpredictable. She might respond with grace and understanding, or she might feel deeply hurt and violated by what could be perceived as a deliberate slight. "That conversation will certainly need to happen," Charles agreed, "but we should probably develop our initial response strategy first. Catherine deserves to hear our proposed approach rather than being asked to solve the problem for us." As they continued to discuss potential responses, the gravity of the situation became increasingly apparent. This wasn't simply a matter of returning a borrowed necklace with an apology. It was a complex issue involving family relationships, public perception, media management, and royal protocol. The ripple effects could impact everything from Catherine's trust in the family to public confidence in the monarchy's internal harmony. "There's something else we need to consider," Charles said soberly. "William's reaction to this situation may be even more significant than Catherine's. He's very protective of his wife, and he may view this as a deliberate provocation rather than an innocent mistake." The thought of William's potential anger added another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. The relationship between Charles and his eldest son had evolved positively over the years, but it remained delicate, particularly when issues arose that could be perceived as affecting Catherine's position or dignity within the family. The next morning arrived with the inevitable cascade of news coverage that Charles and Camilla had dreaded. Photographs from the gala appeared across front pages throughout the Commonwealth, with particular attention focused on Camilla's stunning appearance, and prominently featured the magnificent sapphire and diamond necklace. Fashion editors praised the choice as breathtakingly elegant and a perfect complement to Her Majesty's sophisticated style. Charles sat in his private study at Clarence House. Newspapers spread across his desk like evidence in a criminal investigation. Each publication seemed to outdo the others in their praise for Camilla's fashion choices, with several specifically highlighting the necklace as an example of the royal family's extraordinary jewelry collection. The irony of their admiration was not lost on him. "Sir, his private secretary announced from the doorway. "The Princess of Wales has requested an urgent audience with you and the Queen Consort at your earliest convenience." The message, while phrased with typical royal politeness, carried an unmistakable note of tension. Catherine's request for an immediate meeting confirmed Charles's worst fears about how the situation would be received by William's side of the family. Her discovery of the photographs had clearly prompted a strong reaction. Within an hour, Catherine arrived at Clarence's house, her demeanor composed, but her eyes reflecting a complex mixture of hurt, confusion, and barely contained anger. She was accompanied by William, whose protective stance beside his wife spoke volumes about the seriousness with which they viewed the situation. The meeting took place in Charles's formal drawing room, a setting that seemed to emphasize the gravity of their family crisis. Camilla had spent the morning agonizing over how to approach the conversation, ultimately deciding that complete honesty and humble acknowledgement of her mistake offered the only path forward. "Catherine, William," Charles began formally, "thank you both for coming so promptly. We understand that last evening's events have created an uncomfortable situation that requires immediate attention and resolution." Catherine's eyes moved immediately to Camilla, studying her stepmother-in-law with an expression that was difficult to interpret. "I saw the photographs this morning," she said quietly, her voice steady but carrying an emotional undertone that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. "I was quite surprised to see my wedding gift featured so prominently." The directness of Catherine's statement cut through any possibility of diplomatic dancing around the core issue. Camilla felt her cheeks burning with shame as she prepared to offer the explanation and apology she had rehearsed throughout the sleepless night. "Catherine, I owe you a profound apology," Camilla said, her voice heavy with genuine remorse. "I had no idea that the necklace held such personal significance when I selected it for last evening's gala. It was a terrible oversight on my part, and I deeply regret any hurt or embarrassment this may have caused you." William's jaw tightened noticeably as he processed Camilla's words. How exactly does one accidentally wear someone else's wedding gift to a public event? Surely there are protocols in place to prevent such confusion. His tone was measured but clearly skeptical, suggesting that he viewed the explanation as insufficient or potentially disingenuous. Charles recognized the protective edge in his son's voice, the same quality that had served William well as a husband and father, but could make family negotiations particularly challenging. "The jewelry management system failed in this instance," Charles interjected, hoping to diffuse some of the tension directed at Camilla. There were unclear markings on the documentation, and the personal significance of the piece wasn't properly communicated to the styling team. Catherine listened to these explanations with visible effort to maintain her composure, but her emotional struggle was evident to everyone present. The necklace represented more than just a valuable piece of jewelry. It symbolized her acceptance into the royal family and the personal thought Charles had put into welcoming her as his daughter-in-law. "That necklace was one of the first gifts I received as a member of this family," she said, her voice growing slightly stronger. "Charles chose it specifically for me, explaining that it would be something uniquely mine within the royal collection. Seeing it worn by someone else at such a public event felt like a violation of that trust." The pain in Catherine's voice struck Camilla like a physical blow. She had failed to consider the emotional significance of her choice, focusing only on the aesthetic and practical aspects of her evening's appearance. The realization that she had essentially appropriated a symbol of Catherine's place in the family made her feel sick with regret. "Catherine, there are no words adequate to express how sorry I am," Camilla said, rising from her chair and moving closer to her stepdaughter-in-law. "I never intended to diminish the special meaning of Charles's gift to you. My thoughtlessness was inexcusable." The physical gesture of Camilla standing and approaching seemed to soften Catherine's demeanor slightly, though wariness remained in her expression. Years of royal training had taught both women the importance of maintaining family unity, even in the face of personal hurt and disappointment. "What's done is done," Catherine replied after a long moment of consideration. The photographs are already published, and the public now associates that necklace with last evening's event. The question is how we prevent similar situations in the future. Her pragmatic approach to the crisis impressed Charles, who recognized Catherine's wisdom in focusing on solutions rather than dwelling on recriminations. This quality had served her well throughout her years in the royal family, helping her navigate numerous challenging situations with grace and effectiveness. I propose a complete review of the jewelry cataloging and distribution system, Charles said, grateful for Catherine's constructive attitude. We need clearer documentation of personal gifts versus general collection pieces and better communication protocols when items are being selected for events. William nodded approvingly at his father's suggestion, though his protective stance near Catherine remained unchanged. That seems like a reasonable first step, but I think there also needs to be better awareness among family members about respecting each other's personal belongings. The comment was clearly directed at Camilla, though delivered with enough diplomatic language to avoid being openly accusatory. She accepted the criticism with visible humility, understanding that rebuilding trust would require more than words. "You're absolutely right, William," she acknowledged. "I should have been more careful to verify the provenance of the necklace before wearing it. In the future, I will personally review the documentation for any pieces I'm considering, especially those I'm not familiar with." The conversation continued for another hour, covering practical details about how to handle future media questions and establishing new protocols for jewelry selection. Throughout the discussion, the emotional undercurrents gradually eased as the family worked together toward constructive solutions. By the time Catherine and William prepared to leave, the atmosphere had shifted from confrontational to cautiously cooperative. The hurt feelings hadn't been completely healed, but a path forward had been established that respected everyone's dignity while addressing the legitimate concerns that had been raised. "Catherine," Camilla said as the meeting concluded, "I hope that in time you'll be able to forgive my thoughtlessness. Your grace in handling the situation speaks well of your character and your commitment to family unity." Catherine's response was measured but not unkind. "We all make mistakes, Camilla. What matters is how we learn from them and work to do better going forward." The exchange felt like a small step toward healing, though both women understood that rebuilding complete trust would take time and consistent demonstration of improved judgment. In the days that followed, the palace implemented several changes to prevent similar incidents. The jewelry cataloging system was overhauled with clearer documentation and digital tracking. Personal gifts were designated with special markings that would make their status unmistakable to anyone involved in event preparation. More significantly, family members established regular communication about upcoming events and jewelry selections, creating opportunities to address potential conflicts before they became public embarrassments. These conversations proved valuable for strengthening relationships and demonstrating mutual respect for each other's positions within the family hierarchy. The media coverage of the gala gradually faded from public attention, replaced by other royal news and world events. However, within the family, the incident served as a watershed moment that clarified expectations and improved protocols for managing their complex shared lives. Charles reflected on the crisis as an example of how seemingly minor oversights could have major consequences in royal life. Every decision, every choice of clothing or jewelry, every public appearance carried symbolic weight that extended far beyond personal preference or convenience. For Camilla, the experience was deeply humbling but ultimately educational. She developed a much more careful approach to her public appearances, always considering not just how she looked, but what messages her choices might send about family relationships and respect for tradition. Catherine's handling of the situation earned widespread admiration within palace circles, with many noting her mature response to what could have become a much more damaging family conflict. Her ability to balance personal hurt with institutional concerns demonstrated the sophisticated understanding of royal life that had made her such a valuable addition to the family. The sapphire and diamond necklace was quietly returned to Catherine's personal collection, where it resumed its proper place as a symbol of her unique position within the royal family. When she wore it again several months later to a state dinner, the photographs generated admiration for its beauty without any reference to the earlier controversy. The incident ultimately strengthened rather than weakened family bonds, serving as a reminder that even small gestures of respect and consideration could have profound impact on relationships within the complex world of modern monarchy. Through honest communication and mutual commitment to learning from mistakes, the royal family demonstrated their ability to grow stronger through adversity.